This happened to me just a few weeks ago, and it hasn't left my memory since. I'm 20 years old and had just moved into a small apartment complex a few miles from my parents' house. I had never lived alone before, so the whole situation was pretty new to me. The complex was 3 stories tall and had only 6 apartments. The only one available was on the top floor, so that's the one I took. I finally got everything moved in and was able to relax a bit before bed. It was around 10 p.m., but I still had to set up my bed and make dinner. The only thing I had was ramen, so I put a pot of water on the stove to boil. While I was waiting, I heard the floor in front of my apartment creak softly. I wasn't sure at first whether the building just made noises or if someone was actually at my door. Either way, I decided to check. I opened the door slowly and said, "Hello?" There was an older man standing a few feet away with his back to me. I assumed he lived in the neighboring apartment, since he was facing that door. A few seconds passed, then he turned slightly and said, "Sorry," before walking down the stairs. I closed the door and checked on the water. I started feeling uneasy. There was no reason for anyone to come up to the top floor unless they lived there. He didn't go into the neighboring apartment. I finished making the ramen and tried not to think about it too much. I was excited to finally have my own place, and I didn't want to be creeped out on my first night. I made my bed, turned off all the lights, and eventually fell asleep around 11 or 12. At 1:29 a.m., I woke up after hearing something from the room below me. It sounded like soft shuffling footsteps. I lay there listening. About 5 minutes later, I heard the creaking floor right outside my door again. My heart started racing. I was trying to remember if I had locked the door earlier. Then I heard the subtle clicking sound of the doorknob turning. Thank God it was locked. After a few seconds, I heard the neighbor's door open and close. I got out of bed, double-checked my lock, and went back to sleep. I told myself it must have been the old man who got confused about which door was his. The next morning, there was a loud knock at my door. 2 police officers were standing there. They asked if I had experienced anything unusual last night or if anything was missing. Apparently, a man had robbed 2 apartments in the complex, both of which had been left unlocked. I told them everything. They thanked me and left. I still don't know if they caught the guy, but nothing else happened. Just thinking about it makes me really uneasy. I can't stop wondering what would have happened if I had forgotten to lock my door that night. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, my house was at the end of a quiet neighborhood road that backed up against a large, dense forest. My friends and I would always play and walk there. One regular Friday night, I invited my best friend over. By the time he arrived, the sun was already setting, but we still wanted to go into the woods for a while. We grabbed heavy flashlights and headed out. We walked for about 1,015 minutes before sitting down on a fallen tree to talk. We lost track of time. When we finally looked up, the forest was almost completely dark. We turned on our flashlights and started heading back. It was eerily quiet except for the sound of leaves crunching under our feet. After a couple of minutes, we both suddenly stopped. We heard the clear sound of someone else walking slowly through the leaves just ahead of us, about 1,520 feet away, hidden behind the trees. Why would anyone be walking alone in the woods at this time of night? Just as the footsteps seemed to be moving away, they stopped. Everything became dead silent. Then, suddenly, I heard leaves crunching right behind us. A wave of pure terror hit me. I took off running toward my house as fast as I could. My shoulders kept slamming into trees because it was so dark and dense. I could hear footsteps chasing me. After about 30 seconds, the footsteps suddenly turned sharply to the right and faded into the distance. I made it to my backyard, ran inside, and locked the door. I was out of breath and terrified. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. My friend burst in. He said after I ran, he froze. He heard 2 sets of footsteps running after me. Then he ran home too. My parents called the police, but nothing ever came of it. My friend and I still talk about that night to this day. Part of me wishes I had looked back, but in that dense forest, I probably would have run straight into a tree anyway. That remains the most terrifying experience of my life. It was a Saturday night. My friends and I were rushing to a local bar to catch the opening act of a music night. We were late, so I quickly grabbed my wallet and keys and we left. After a few drinks at the bar, I reached into my pockets and realized my phone was gone. We searched everywhere. The tables, the whole bar, but couldn't find it. I had one of my friends call my number. After 2 rings, someone answered. I said hello? There was no reply, just someone breathing on the other end. After a few seconds, they hung up. I was annoyed but figured I'd deal with it tomorrow. About an hour later, we left the bar. I dropped my friends off and drove home. As I was pulling into my driveway, I suddenly remembered the last place I had my phone. On my bed while I was getting ready to leave. A cold feeling washed over me. I walked inside cautiously, went straight to the bedroom, and turned on the light. My phone was sitting exactly where I had left it on the bed. I searched the entire house, but there was no sign of anyone. That night I barely slept. Every little noise made me jump. I told my friends the next day, and we all agreed it was incredibly creepy. We decided not to call the police since nothing was actually stolen. Nothing else ever happened, but even years later, it still keeps me up at night wondering what really happened with my phone that evening.